was wide open.
After the turnover.
He's got a man.
Harburg going deep. Caught.
I want to give a round of applause to Northern Iowa, as I thought they came in here and gave the Huskers exactly what they needed to get ready for the Big Ten. They didn't come in here intimidated. They didn't come in here afraid. They came in here and was physical. This is what the Huskers needed to get ready for Big Ten play. And they came in here and looked a lot better than Colorado did. And Colorado will be glad they didn't have to play them. So again, I want to tip my hat to Northern Iowa. It was a good performance, and it gave Nebraska the test they needed and gave them things to look at and clean up to definitely prepare for the Big Ten. I want to talk about why Northern Iowa had so much success moving the ball. And that's Northern Iowa's offensive line. So when we talked about one of the worst offensive lines in Colorado, Northern Iowa might be one of the more, believe it or not, one of the more experienced for sure, but one of the better offensive lines we're going to see this year. No doubt you're going to see better ones. You're going to see better ones probably, definitely at Ohio State, probably at USC. But this was an experienced offensive line. Their offensive line came back. They've been playing for a while together. Some seniors on that team. Had a lot of 6-year seniors on this whole team. This was as an experienced team. And you kind of seen even with Nebraska what it means to have veterans on offensive and especially the defensive side of the ball. And I think this is another reason. They pushed and pushed to the point you kind of, I know some of you, and I was kind of that way too. You were kind of a little concerned about how they pushed Nebraska's defensive line at times. They got some great pushes, and you could tell this group has been together, knows what to do, and it just proves that technique means a lot. I mean, this is something maybe Colorado should have been looking at when they wanted to go get it. And you know what's impressive about Northern Iowa? They had a lot of 6-year seniors and some good players, some of them running backs, and yet they're at Northern Iowa. They could have easily went into the transfer portal. Some of them could have went and played with an FBS school. And I just tip my hat to this whole program and how well they did. And so another one is I want to get in here and look at some of these stats that we saw over the weekend. And you see Nebraska pulled this game out 34-3. And let's look at some of these stats and break down some of these offensive stats that we've seen today. So first thing I want to do is go down here, and before we get individually wise, you can see that Nebraska gave up their most yards, and I understand they've only played 3 games. Gave up their most yards. They gave up 301 yards on 71 plays. The one thing I loved about Northern Iowa, they kind of gave a blueprint on maybe how you beat Nebraska. They held the ball, controlled the clock, and ran 71 plays to Nebraska's only 48 plays. They averaged 4.2 yards per play, respectable. They had a little difficult stopping Nebraska. And this is a game that, yes, it ended up 34-3. And my final prediction was 56-6. And trust me, if they didn't control the clock and Nebraska had their normal 60 to 70 plays, it probably would have been around 50 points in this game. So overall, you could see they did struggle. Northern Iowa struggled a little bit at times in penalties, had some key holding calls that cost them some drives. They gave Nebraska the test they really needed. This is a game that they came out with an impressive win. You got to remember, this ain't the 90s anymore. You can't go in there and complain, wow, they only won 34-3. And trust me, that's what we used to do back then. We remember going to, what was it? We went to Tom Osborne's game down in Baylor, I think in 97. I believe it was. And Baylor scored with, I think, seconds left to make it like 49-20 or something like that. And when we got home, our wives thought they lost. They don't care about football. Can you believe that? And we were more upset because they gave up that final touchdown to make it 20 points instead of like 13 or whatever it was. And we had a lot of backups in. Tom was kind of like what you saw Rule here. He got a lot of his second, third stringers in. He got them experience. So when it was time for their time, they knew how it was. You could see overall they rushed for 139 yards on 39 attempts, 3.6. Not great, but respectable. And that's the most yards the Huskers have given up. And Nebraska only rushed for 142, but they averaged 6.5 per carry. They actually threw for 281 to UNI's 162. So you can see even UNI was pretty well balanced. But what I want to get into, if we haven't seen this already, is their quarterback. Another thing that impressed me was Aiden Dunn, their quarterback, the redshirt junior. You could see he went 13 of 25 for 117 yards. He did have a pick. That one really cost him. It was a pick in the red zone, overthrew his guy. He had his guy wide open. And this is kind of what I brought up about Colorado. Colorado left a lot of missed opportunities on the field. When I went back and watched the coaching view, the aerial view where you could see the whole field, you saw a lot of the receivers for Colorado that got wide open. And you could see Aiden Dunn here. He didn't miss a lot of them, but he missed on that one quite a bit, overthrew his guy. He was wide open, and Hartzell picked that ball off around the 4-yard line. But overall, this kid right here, he knew when to take off, made plays with his legs. He kept the defense on their toes. And you're probably going to see that quite a bit when you get to the point with Nebraska when they play a mobile quarterback or one that can use their legs. And you can see Aiden Dunn went 13 of 25, 117 yards. And you can see Dylan, again, 17 of 23, 247 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did have an interception. And yes, it was kind of underthrown, but this is an interception. If this is what you throw, you're not going to be too upset. Yeah, you don't want any turnovers, but you're not going to be too upset because this was a deep ball. Lloyd, he probably needed to lead him a lot more, and he did, and he didn't. Man, just give the defender kudos, man. He went up and made a play, but it's no different than a punt. He threw that ball about 50 yards, and they picked it off. It's basically a punt, to be honest with you. So I don't criticize. I kind of like when they take them shots because it gives the other teams in the Big Ten, Illinois, and them something to work on because they know good and well Nebraska is not all about run. It's like last year they weren't scared of the pass. This year they have to. This year they got to respect the pass. And I know I've heard a lot of people talk about they're using too many players. They got too many weapons. And let's go down here and look. Look how many Nebraska. Look how many players got a reception in this game. Carter Nelson. Let's do this. Carter Nelson led. I love to see it that Carter Nelson is, and you're going to see more and more as this year goes on, and as he gets more comfortable. And man, it would have been great if he could have came in January. And I understand what he was doing when he stayed school. And, give him kudos for that. But how deadly would he be right now if he came in January with Dylan and Ja'Cory Barney in there? But by the end of the year, by the time we're playing Wisconsin and Iowa, he's going to be well into this offense. He's going to be well involved in this offense. To me, he's probably he's definitely your better athlete, probably better receiver than any of them. And yes, I'm including Banks and Nair. Banks and Nair just got the experience and the age, where you got Carter, who's 18. I don't think he's even turned 19 yet. If he has, he just turned 19. But you can see we just spread the ball around. There's 4 catches to Carter. Emmett had 3 catches. Look at that. Ja'Cory Barney had 3, along with the touchdown himself. They don't have it here, but Ja'Cory Barney did have a touchdown. Why they don't have it here on the stats? Probably not the official stats right now. It's the ones I found, but you know good and well. You guys know good and well he had one. Ramir Johnson, had a couple of catches. Nair had two. Thomas Fedoni had two. And then you could see even Harburg had one. So this gives Illinois and the other Big Ten things they got to work on because they have no idea who they need to cover. They have no idea who to concentrate on. They can't concentrate on the run. They can't concentrate on pass. And I've heard a lot of people going, man, they need to narrow this down. Trust me, I guarantee they're going to narrow down. They're not going to be doing this. Now, once they get in the Big Ten, you're going to probably see mainly Banks and Nair, maybe Bonner. You're definitely going to see Ja'Cory Barney. You're definitely going to see Carter Nelson. And then obviously you're going to have Emmett Johnson and Ramir Johnson out of the backfield. And so it's good that they're doing this. They're I think they were going a little vanilla, if you know what I mean. And that's what I want to kind of get to when we're discussing how well they did and did they struggle a bit during the on the defensive side? Did they struggle against the run? And we're going to kind of take a look at that later to see, is this something we need to be concerned about? Or is this something that they just didn't show? You got to remember, we were without Jamari Butler and we were without Bear the first half. And then obviously on the offensive line, we were at we didn't have Mazuka, probably to me the best offensive lineman we have, and we still moved the ball pretty decent. We moved the ball pretty well. To the point, Brian Buschini didn't even get in the game to punt. If it wasn't for him taking kickoffs, he would never even have played. He could have watched it from his television set, to be honest with you. That just proved right there that the Huskers could have easily scored in the 50s if they would have had their normal stats. Just tip your hat again, like I said. Tip your hat. We'll just do that. Tip my hat. Got my Husker hat. Can't do that, right? Tip my hat to Northern Iowa. They came in here and that crowd didn't phase them. Even when Nebraska went down and scored right off the bat, they took the ball and took 10 minutes. Yes, they only got 3 points. And it was one of those, what we heard a lot, I think before, it was one of those where the defense was bending, but not breaking, bending and not breaking. And I know overall no one really likes that. I don't like it either. You don't probably like it either. But the ultimate, as you guys know, the ultimate goal is to keep them out of off the scoreboard. You know, if you want to go back to that 94 Orange Bowl against Florida State, Nebraska outplayed Florida State, out yardage Florida State. But the one stat they needed to outdo them in, they didn't. That was the scoreboard. So if you want to win a stat, the scoreboard is the one you want to win. But Northern Iowa is a very, very good FCS team. They give FBS teams all the time fits. They don't back down from anyone, and I guarantee you're not going to see it. And you're going to, if you watch them the rest of the year, they came in here 2-0. Don't be surprised they don't go unbeaten. I don't think they play another FBS team the rest of the year. But the one thing I loved about it, if you notice this, guys, and I know you had to notice this, we talked all week about Northern Iowa is going to give us what we need, that powerhouse, line them up, smack you in the face. You know, we already got that look. And what did they do? They came out and spread us out and 4 or 5 wide receivers and threw the ball. And I loved it. The first thing I did, I know they threw Nebraska for a loop there at the beginning of the game and drove down, took 10 minutes, and we just couldn't get them off field. Again, in the third down, they made 2 or 3 third down plays. They made a fourth down play. And then ultimately Nebraska held them to the field goal. We've always respected good opponents that come in here. One that come in here and then they still get beat. But the one thing we want to look at, are the Huskers ready for the Big Ten? That's the key we need to ask. Are the Huskers ready for the Big Ten? And we kind of got a mixture of all things in these first 3 games. We had fast pace, UTEP coming in here, fast pace, putting the ball in the air. Probably didn't do as much as they really wanted to. Remember, that was their first game under Scotty Walden. But then you had Colorado with, to me, you're probably not going to find better skilled positions, except probably till you get to Ohio State, maybe USC. But you're probably looking, I know, of at least 2 of the top 10 players in Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter. And so you could say, yeah, their offensive line's bad, but their defense is well improved as they went in there and put a number on Colorado State. So it was kind of good to see because I think that proved just kind of what I said, that when they said, hey, was Colorado that bad or was Nebraska that good? And I said, it's probably a little both. Colorado's probably not that bad. Their offensive line's bad. But again, it was only game 2. They have a 5-star freshman on there, which is hard at left tackle, I believe he plays, which is a very hard position. You got to remember, true freshmen playing on the offensive line is very, very rare. You just don't see that very often. It's hard. It's just a hard position to learn, especially against some of these defensive edges that you go against. So I think as time goes on, they'll get better, and as long as they can stay healthy, they'll do decent. I think they still have a chance to make in the bowl, and so we'll see how that goes. So are the Huskers ready for the Big Ten? Probably as ready as they're going to be. I don't know if you're going to really. I think, like I said, that game you just did is is fine. If you want to look at offensively for us, and if you want to look at Dylan Raiola and this offense, it's definitely more improved than it was last year. We're more balanced. Like I said last year, look how well we ran last year, and trust me, no team came to play Nebraska and worried about the pass, and yet we still ran one of the best running teams in the nation. The offensive line to me is holding up, doing well. Even on the blitzes, we're picking up the blitzes. And I think we saw in this game, um, probably for the first time, Dylan kind of being showing he's a true freshman. He had a couple throws. It's funny because now we nitpick. He had a couple throws. He had them back to back and missed them. And it just shows how spoiled we're kind of getting with him. If you remember in the Colorado game on the fourth down play that Colorado did stop him on, he had Jalen Lloyd wide open. He had another one where Jalen Lloyd was open and he missed it. But on the fourth down where he tried to go out and get the first down, Jalen Lloyd broke deep. Nobody went with him. And that's things as time goes on. And I'm sure they showed him that on the sideline. They probably showed him that during practice. But the one thing you loved about Dylan Raiola, he's never satisfied. And what did he say? If y'all watched his interview after the game, and even though it's around midnight, he's going to go home and start watching he's going to watch the film of UNI and start getting ready for Illinois. He prepares, prepares, and prepares. And the reason why, what did Patrick Mahomes told him? He said the best advice he could give him is you prepare, prepare, prepare through the week, and then lay it all out on the weekend. And so I think he's taken that to heart. So you're going to see him. He's never going to go in there and not be prepared. We always talk about being a true freshman. The biggest thing is learning the playbook. Dylan Raiola knows all 120 plays. So if you're a junior or senior or whatever, and you don't know all these plays, how's that make you look? And that ought to tell others they just probably need to work as hard. Got some great players on here. But if everybody on the team prepared and worked as hard as Dylan Raiola, this would be a championship team. That's how you do it. And that's what's going to keep us in these games. I think it's going to keep us well into these games. And so, tip my hat. Again, Dylan Raiola threw for, what was it? Let's calculate this again, for about 74 yards. We're talking about at the beginning of the year, we wanted to see what we'd say 65%. He said we got to have that. Well, so far, he averaged 73.9 in this game, and if you go overall, he's averaging 74% for the year. Man, guys, you will take that. Trust me, you will take that. If he throws 25 passes every game, trust me, that's 18, 19 receptions out of 25. You know, you multiply that just by 10-yard average, you're still looking close to 200 yards. You're 15, you're well into 200. It looks like Nebraska consistently could get 250, 280 passing yards a game. They rush for 200, 250. They're going to be well balanced. It gives the defense something they can't load the box on. They could spread them out and still run. They could spread them out and throw. And so I feel like Nebraska's offensively probably as ready as they're going to be. We gave a lot of things for Illinois and the rest of the Big Ten to look at. You got Harburg in there, caught him a pass, then ran the Wildcat, and then he came in and ran offensive drive that actually Emmett scored on, and they got their last touch on. So it wasn't all Dylan that got the scores. So, and Nebraska got a lot of the second teamers in. I don't think they got as many third teamers in, but they played the second team offensive line. And you could saw in that fourth quarter, all the defense was the second teamers or further. And the good thing about this year is you could tell this year real easily if it's the backups because they're not single digits. When you look out there and see 29, 25, you know good and well of the backups. And what about that fourth down play? I want to give kudos to Mario Buford, true freshman, Marquis' brother, came in here on that fourth down call. To me, he was being held on that perimeter, and yet he still broke off that block, that hold, and made the tackle 2 yards short of the end zone to take over the ball and keep them out of the end zone. Because, yeah, it wouldn't have mattered in the game. Nebraska still would have won, but it mattered to us. You guys know that. And it mattered to the defense to keep him out of that end zone. To me, it's not as bad as it looks, not as great as it looks, but good thing is it gave us a real good win. Because when's the last time we had wins like? When's the last time you could? I know the last time we went 3-0 was in 2016, but go back to 2016. That 3-0 wasn't 40-7. 28-10 to Colorado and 34-3. Almost all these games, we've all been kind of comfortable where we didn't have to be on the edge of our seat till the end of the game. And good and well that's coming. And you're probably like me and probably like Rule. We want to see how are we going to respond when we finally get that close game. And you might get it here against Illinois. You're about to go against a real good Illinois team. And we're going to talk about the Big Ten, the rest of Big Ten, about how this Big Ten is a lot different than what we all predicted and what we thought it would be. Teams that we thought would be really, really good or real good, maybe not as good. And then teams that we thought would probably a weakness that are really good teams. And bad thing is they're on Nebraska's schedule. You kind of wish you had Washington on your team. You do get UCLA, so they're struggling. But again, that's late in the year. Do they figure it out by then? A lot of these teams that are struggling, you wishing, man, I wish we could play them now because you're afraid they're going to figure it out by the end of the year. And then next thing you know, you get their best game. So it's kind of hard to, this team better than the other team that played them because they lost to that team, but now look how well they're playing. So, but one thing I did want to say is, did you and I show a weakness in Nebraska's defense? And I know a lot of people's wondering because they ran the ball decent, and some's going to say yes, they gave them a blueprint to keep up with Nebraska, to stop Nebraska, to move the ball on Nebraska. I disagree because if you watch the game and kind of go watch the game again, and that's kind of what you got to do, guys. I don't really jump on. I sometimes I want to jump on and do a reaction video because I think sometimes when you jump on do a reaction, you don't have the whole story, and you might be reacting to emotional stuff, and after you go back and watch it, you realize, hey, it's not what you thought, or it might have been worse than what you thought. Something you thought was real good might not have been. So you go back and watch it. And like I said, I was impressed with Northern Iowa and their offensive line, but Nebraska's defense seemed to be playing very vanilla, if you know what I mean. They didn't show as much, and I wonder if that was on purpose. I think they started out that way, wanted to see how it went. I think offensively they opened it up a little bit because I think they wanted to give Illinois and the rest of the Big Ten more to look at and prepare for. And like Rule said, if I could get them to waste 20 minutes on trying to figure out how to stop Harburg when he's in there, if I could get them to waste 20 minutes of their practice time because they get less than a week. I mean, the game's on Friday. And so you kind of accomplish something. You got to remember, this is a game that Nebraska won last year. This is a game that Harbor won. What was it, 20 to 3, guys? I think they got 20 points, which, to be honest with you, is probably one of their better offensive lines. So don't be surprised you don't even see Harburg in there. He goes in there and runs some of the RPOs better because he's the better runner. But I love that you saw Dylan run the RPO. He ain't going to blow by you, but you could tell they weren't worried about Dylan Raiola running. Him running that RPO gives, again, Illinois and them something to worry about. But I got a feeling what these Big Ten teams are going to do, they're going to say, and this is what I would do. I wouldn't worry about Dylan Raiola running. He don't run that often. He runs very few to the point you're going to let him have the ones that he does. The only way you're going to start getting him to pay attention to him doing that if he just started constantly doing it in the game. He did it one time. And yes, he went for what, about 15 yards, something like that? 12? I don't know. It was a first down. But yet you didn't really see him do it again. And so they're all concentrating on the running backs. They're not worried about the RPO with him running. Now they might want to worry about the RPO with him throwing, but I think he needs to probably do it just a couple more times in a game, enough to make them say, hey, this could cost us. But I got a feeling when Illinois is looking at that, they're not even going to be phased by it. They're probably not even going to work on it. They're going to say again, he's not going to be running. Now, what Harburg comes in, they'll be looking at it. And so do they have to think about that if he does come in? So again, I don't think they showed a weakness to him. I think they played pretty vanilla even throughout the whole defense. Remember, we had, like I said, Butler was out. You had Bear out the first half. And again, they bent, but they still kept him out of the end zone. And even the second teamers kept him out of the end zone in the fourth quarter. Another thing I want to do again was tip my hat again to the crowd. This is going to be, it's probably more and better now. It's probably more crucial for the noise in the crowd, the atmosphere in a game, to the point you saw, because the FCS teams do not use the electronic technology, but they get the opportunity, the choice of doing that when they play an FBS team. You and I decided not to use it, and I don't blame them because one, they're not used to it. They weren't able to practice with it. And they probably knew good and well going in that stadium after watching that Colorado game, it ain't going to do them any good. So they just kept what they've been always doing, and that was the signal, and worked fine for them. So we need to continue to do that, and I know we will. It kind of surprised me when he thought Rule said we're not going to anticipate. He didn't anticipate the crowd to be as loud and as into the game and as wild as they were against Colorado, because Colorado. The reason why I say he's wrong, we haven't won in so long, and a lot of these fans don't remember Nebraska winning. I'm one of the few, some of us are one of the few that remember when they were great, remember when they won. You got to think, if it's been 10 years since we really were that good, even some of these players, they were what, 8 or 9 years old. You get some of these fans, they're younger than that. Even some that are probably in their 20s, they were 10 and you got to go back to the 90s. Well, you'd almost have to be 30 years old when you were born then. So you still wouldn't remember. So I think because they're hungry and they want it and they've been, told, and you got to remember in Nebraska, we breed them from birth, to be Husker fans. That's why this fan base is so loyal and will continue to be loyal, and probably heard the stories from their parents and their grandparents about how great they were. So they were like starving for this. So because I feel like Nebraska continues to win like this, you're going to see these crowds so wild and so into these games. Plus the night games are just that way. I'm telling you, night games are, I don't know what it is about night games. Is it because we sit out there and tailgate all day and maybe a few beers in, and so you're a little more rowdy? I don't know, but it's louder. I just love and I want to go to the night games. Definitely going to go again. Going to go on Friday. Going to make that 12-hour drive up to Lincoln for the Friday game. And you guys don't realize I don't stay up there. I might come early. Like mainly if it's a night game, I'm there in the morning. To the point I leave the night before, and I'm there by the morning. And I run around, go see the old neighborhood or something like that. see the old house, and just enjoy the people there throughout the day. And then right after the game, I start heading back. I'm usually up about 55 hours straight. And trust me, I feel it by the time I get home. But I go straight up there, watch the game, go straight back because I usually got to go back to work on Monday. Good thing is this one is on Friday, gives me an extra day, but still I'll probably go back. And that's kind of how my process is when I go to these games. And getting older, it's a little harder to do that, but I don't have a problem. I'll sit back and pull over and take a little nap. I have to if it gets to the point as bad. And I actually drive a Tesla, so I drive an electric car. So I'll pull up to charge and take a nap while it's charging. But for the most part, I'll drive straight back. I reached out to Sean and Sip and Robin there on their podcast after the game and told them I was listening to them while we're driving back. And I think even Robin said, "Man, is he driving back all night?" Yeah, I was driving back all night, and they helped me get through it. I would have stayed on all night with them if they would have been on all night. So I was part of the 2,000 people that was up at 1 o'clock in the morning, and that's just Nebraska fans. It's just a different feel. One thing we wanted to look at, how was the unforced errors? And I think for overall, they didn't do too bad. Yes, they had the one turnover, and again, that was the big bomb to Jalen Lloyd, a little under, thrown a little behind him, and just give the defender kudos, man. He went up and made a play because Jalen was coming down with that ball, and he went in there and took it away. Tip my hat to him, you know. And I think Raiola even said himself, I should have let him more. I should have threw it to the point where with Jalen Lloyd, you throw it to the point, let him go get it, you know. And that's probably the only thing that Raiola probably said, hey, I should have let him more, and he should have. But again, it was like I said, a 50-yard pass or something like that. And so if you're going to pick one or throw a pick, that's the one you do it. It's like a punt. So it ain't, to me, that's not too bad. It's not as good as throwing it into, 10 yards out into a crowd and getting it picked there. And then they only had 4 turnovers. Some of the 4 penalties. They only had 4 penalties. And 4 penalties for 44 yards, I believe it was. Not too bad. You had 3 against UTEP. So last week was, to me, more the officiating because there's holding on almost every call. But that's another thing I'm going to start doing is how was the game officiating in this one? I want to start doing that in these games because to me, if the officiating's good, you're not talking about them. It's kind of like the offensive line, you know. When you're really talking about one particular offensive lineman, it's usually because it's bad. Referees, officiating's the same thing. If you don't bring their name up, you don't talk about them, it's because they did their job. I didn't have a problem with them. I thought they did a respectable job. This is a bit now a Big Ten, I believe it's a Big Ten crew, if I'm not mistaken, right? Mistaking. I'm hoping this is kind of what we get. I'm hoping last week's officiating got a little chewing, got whatever they get, because I know we don't get to hear about what kind of disciplinary action they get. But again, I want to tip my hat. It was a clean game. You're always going to have mistakes. You're going to have calls you didn't make. You're going to have calls you probably should have made or didn't make. So we're not going to frown on that. And I think you and I had a few extra penalties in Nebraska, had a few holding, but overall they only had 9. So there was only 13 total penalties in the whole game. Trust me, Nebraska had 12 or 13 by themselves last week. So let's kind of now break down the Illinois game and see what are we looking at here. How well is Illinois? This is one of these teams we took at the beginning and thought that this is probably an easier win. And I don't know if we want to say that. Because if you look here, this is overall in their 3 games, they're 3-0. They're averaging about 33 points per game. I think that's about where the Huskers are, somewhere in there. But they're only giving up less than 9 points a game. Now, Nebraska is giving up 20, so they're averaging about 6.6, something like that, 6.67 if I had to guess. So I expect could this be a defensive game? Probably. You could see rushing wise, they've rushed for 520 yards, averaging 153 yards per game, and they've and their opponents have only their opponents are averaging 125.7, which is good to me considering the teams they played. Now they did play Kansas, and a lot of people's putting them up there because of that game that they beat a ranked Kansas team. But then Kansas went and lost to UNLV. UNLV is a decent team, but again, you're now starting to think, okay, is just Kansas not that good? And to me, this is a good sign. Now, if you go to the passing, they average 225. So to me, they're not too far. They do throw a little more, and then they probably run, but they got a big runner. On the opponent side, they throw for 150. So even though they've given up only less than 9 points, the defense is decent, but I don't think they're as good as they were last year, to be honest with you. And our offense is better than last year. So if you look at these, we go back and look at, they've averaged 16, or excuse me, 6 penalties a game. They're averaging 6 penalty a game. Really good. I think that's good. You average to me less than 6 or 7. You're doing pretty good in a game. Where their opponents is less than that. And time of possession, their average per game is 32. So that's where they're pretty even. And that's where Nebraska could take control of the ball again, take control of the clock. They lost that against UNI. To me, that's their thing. They need to control that clock. And I think you're probably going to see that pretty decent on the third downs. And they've actually made a couple of fourth downs. They've lost one fumble in these 3 games. If you look at their passing, their quarterback is Luke Altmaier. Luke Altmaier is a junior. He's another one that could use his legs to run. His best game was in the Eastern Illinois game 1. He rushed for 27 yards on 3 carries. It's 9 a carry, guys. So he don't run a whole lot, but he's kind of like what you saw with Dunn. If it's there, he's going to take off. And I think you're going to see that in this game. I think that did show them something when they were going to watch this UNI game. He threw for 213 yards and threw for 4 touchdowns. Against that Kansas team, threw for 192 yards. Didn't throw a touchdown pass, but he rushed for 6 times. Probably a couple of them were probably sacks, to be honest with you. And then against Central Michigan that they just played, he threw for 242 yards, 19 of 29, 2 touchdowns, and had about 6 yards. He even caught a pass. Look at that. So they probably had a trick play there where he caught a pass for 3 yards. He's a tall dude, 6'2", that's pretty decent, 205. So he hasn't thrown any interceptions. So they've only turned the ball over one time. One time. So even though Nebraska is a +3, they're a plus, what are they, a +5? I believe they are. So are we going to see any turnovers in this game? Can Nebraska force some turnovers with Illinois? And can Nebraska continue to hold on the ball and manage the ball? I think Dylan's done an outstanding job when it comes to that. If you look at their rushing, this is the boy that you got to worry about. This is a man right here. He's even just a sophomore, but this guy's 6'3", 250 pounds. And you're going to have him come at me. He rushed for 108 yards against the Eastern Illinois with a touchdown. Then he rushed for 40 against Kansas and 25 against Central Michigan. He had a touchdown in all 3 games, and he's even caught 3 passes out of the backfield. Keep an eye. This is their workhorse, and I think they're going to try to loosen Nebraska up, try to get them to bring people into the box. And because you got a running back that's bigger than a lot of your linebackers, and definitely bigger than your linebackers and your secondary. And so that's why that UNI game was critical and was crucial. He's probably more talented than the UNI, but he's a sophomore. He's probably about 20 years old. where you were looking at redshirt seniors at UNI, they were probably 24, if I had to guess, 24, maybe 25. They were men playing them positions. Makes a difference. But don't get me wrong, Fegan here is very talented, going to be a very good one. So we're going to get a good feel with him come this weekend. So how well we think this game's going to go. And they have, if you look at the standings, not standings, if you look at the line, currently they have Nebraska favored by 8.5 with the over under at 46.5. And I think Nebraska could cover both these, but definitely I'd take the under on the 46.5. I just don't see, let's put it this way. If it's over 46.5, then Nebraska probably wins this pretty handily. I just don't see Illinois' offense scoring more than 14 points. I just don't see it. Doesn't mean they can't, but we're at home again at night. This crowd's going to be wild, crazy. They're going to have a hard time communicating. And I feel like it's going to affect them because they come in here needing to win. You and I came in here going, hey, everybody expects us to lose. We have nothing to lose. We're going to go in there. We're relaxed. We're supposed to lose this game. Illinois, even though there might be underdogs, they're 3-0 and want to set their standard too. He's going to have them ready. But I'm going to tell you right now, it's hard to get ready for this crowd. So how do I see this game going? I feel like Nebraska, probably because of being at home, because of the crowd, they could again keep from having them unforced errors, them dumb mistakes, keep the penalties down, not turn the ball over, control the turnovers. I think they'll end up winning. I think it's going to be more of a defensive game, but I think Nebraska's offense being a little more even. And with their run game, I think they'll be able to run against them. And with Dylan, they'll be able to throw in some of them passes. You're probably going to see more of Carter Nelson, Ja'Cory Barney. But I think Nebraska pulls this game out and wins 24-12. Again, I don't expect this to be a high-scoring game. 24 might even be a little high. It could be 21-12. I see 21-14. I probably wouldn't touch the line at 8.5. I'm one of those that when you're at a point where you really not want to take that line, if you had to take the line, you always go with the plus points and take Illinois plus the 8.5. But it's one I'd probably leave the plus, and if I went with any line, I'd go with the under at 46.5. So let's take a look to me at the rest of the Big Ten. And you're going to be surprised, like I said, that some of these teams we thought probably going to be easy wins might not be easy wins anymore. And some of them where we thought it's going to be tough might not be as tough anymore. And so a couple of them, the ones to me that are really looking good that we were wondering about and didn't think maybe they were is Indiana for one. Indiana's for real guys. They put up some points, 60, 70 points in games. That's not going to be a walk in the park. And it's at Bloomington. It's in Indiana. And it's right before the Ohio State game. That's a game we really need to look out for. Another one is I think we already talked about is Illinois. They've looked really good. We're about to find out about them. Good thing is they're at home. Rutgers is another one. We all kind of thought Rutgers is going to be a pretty decent one. Their schedule wasn't that good. They only played a couple of games. To me, right now, out of them three, Indiana seems probably the scariest. And again, mainly because it's on the road. But who's not looked as good? Wisconsin and even Iowa. Iowa struggled again they lost to Iowa State last week, struggled again this week before kind of pulling away a little bit. And then Wisconsin's not looking as good. They got spanked a little bit by Alabama, but then a lot of teams get spanked by Alabama. And Purdue's probably what we thought they were. We do go on the road to Purdue, and I guess if you're going to do a road game, if you want to give Dylan Raiola his first road game, at Purdue this year might be the best one to do it. And but we've struggled winning in West Lafayette over the few years. So to me, any Big Ten game is not going to be a walk in the park. You're going to expect some of these to be close. So somewhere down the road, we're going to have to win a close game in the fourth quarter. And it's good that we're getting a lot of these kind of practice drives at the end of the half to be able to drive down with 2 minutes and score. We did fall short this last game with UNI, but we were kind of in field goal range. I guess we had to have a field goal. Rule might have took that shot, but on 4th and 3, it was probably the right call. Go ahead and practice that point. UCLA is another one that's really struggling. And if you look at them, UCLA is really kind of what we thought. I didn't think UCLA was going to be that good. They got Indiana's the one to put a number on it. It was like 42, was it 42-10 or something like that, or 42-17. And Nebraska gets them at home. So that's probably one, if they can't figure it out by then. The only thing you worry about is teams like Wisconsin and Iowa, maybe even UCLA. Do they figure this out by the time we get to them? I kind of hope not. Where we thought the back end of our schedule might be our toughest, we might be realizing that Illinois, Rutgers, Indiana here at the beginning, and then you got Ohio State right after that. I think you got UCLA after that, and then USC. And USC is looking really good. That defense is a lot better than people thought. So, again, I think we're about to find out. This is where we really find out as Nebraska turned the corner, because we're about to play teams in the Big Ten. And these first 3 games were good warm-up games, good, I guess you call preseason games. I think that's how Rule took them. That's why you saw the players. I know people's talked about how, hey, we need to figure out what running backs are going to play and what receivers. We can't be going to all 4 of these or all 6 or 7 of these playmakers. Well, to Rule, it's preseason. So let me see what I got here. Give the other team something to look at. But you're going to probably see it now narrowed down, kind of like the Colorado game. You saw with the Colorado game, where he played more of the veterans and the more of the starters he wanted to play just because of what happened last year, and he even said that to him. But I still expect all these players to get into the game. Probably not as much as you're seeing now, but I think you're going to see like Banks and Nair, Bonner. You even see Carter Nelson. I think he's going to be more involved. Ja'Cory Barney's going to have to be more involved. The more these two learn the plays, the more involved you're going to see. You saw Ja'Cory Barney got a little more into the game this time. You're going to see more and more and more. And I expect somewhere down the road, Ja'Cory to probably bust one on one of them kick returns, unless they just keep kicking it out of the back of the end zone. So tell me what you think. Do you think Nebraska is ready for the Big Ten? Tell me if you feel like they're going to beat Illinois. Is it going to be as close as we think it is, or is this 8.5 points about right? What do you think about that over under? You think they'll go over that 46.5? And if you want to reach out to me, Jeff at bigredcountry.net. If I don't go to a games, a lot of times I give them away. I've already given away. If y'all watch Janky Rondo, I watch him. He's not a Nebraska fan. He kind of breaks down football games, NFL games, college games. The dude's hilarious, man. He's funny as crap. And he broke down the Colorado game with Nebraska and was just giving Nebraska kudos. He just couldn't believe that crowd. And he brought up about he had to go to one of these games. He had to go to a game in Nebraska. And I reached out to him, and I'm waiting for him to tell me which game he wants. I said, dude, just tell me what game you want, and I'll give you that ticket. Even if I was going to go to it, you just reach out and tell me, hey, I'll go to this game right here. I'll send him that ticket. It's electronically, so I could send it within seconds. I want him to go and feel that crowd and see what it's like in Lincoln. Plus, he talked about he didn't see any brothers in Nebraska. There's brothers in Nebraska. But he's funny. He's funny as hell, guys. If y'all need to watch that channel. It's Janky Rondo. I think it's like JANKYRONDO. Look up his channel, guys, because he breaks down these games. And if you want a little entertainment while he's breaking these games down, this guy is funny as hell. I'm telling you, he's really funny. But like always, guys, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, please smash that like button. It means a lot to me. It helps this channel get out. And I appreciate every and each and one of you guys. So until after the game, I'm going to the game. So probably over the weekend, I'll do another video. But until then, go Big Red.